People all around the world love sport. From playing ball in the backyard through to the Olympic and Paralympic podiums, the majority of the world's population play, watch and enjoy sport. Steve Dart from Play Hard Sports gives listeners the chance to meet people from across the world of entertainment, sports and business who are affecting the way international sport is unfolding. So, with the combination of technology, passion and great people wanting to tell their story, it gives rise to Play Hard Sports Behind the Games podcast.
On Behind the Games podcast, episode 21, we have Steve Liddell, the owner of TriStar Sports Australia, based on the Gold Coast. Steve, good morning. How are you, mate?
I'm good, great.
Mate, fantastic. Thank you so much for coming along to Behind the Games podcast. It's been a real pleasure getting you on. You've got some great stories and you've been around the sports construction industry for a long time. Let me take it back to your early childhood. You were born in Woodridge in Logan in 1974. Tell me your earliest memories.
Well, as I said, I lived down there with Mum and Dad in Woodridge. Dad had a pool sales business down there with dry-clad pools back in the day.
Yep.
With my sister and I've got two sisters. I'm a twin.
Yep.
And an older sister. And we grew up down there. It was not as multicultural as it is today, and they were the good days. And
was it farmland back then?
No, we were just in the mainstream central Logan, little block. We had 5 swimming pools in our backyard.
That's unusual.
That was Dad's business. And my job on weekends outside of school was to maintain those pools.
Okay.
And that was pretty much, and then grew up down there. And
well, it's not often that you'd have 5 swimming pools in your backyard. So how did that come about? Was he into sales of pools and things like that?
Yeah, well, he owned that. It said he bought the pools off Dry-Clad Pools, and then he would sell them out of the house. That was the family home. So the 2 front rooms were the offices, and the back of the house is where Mum and us kids would live, and we would run around the backyard. And it was a pretty big block in that sense to accommodate that. And when Dad was selling pools to customers and other customers would come in and walk around the display village, it was technically, I took it on board to entertain those people while Dad was busy with other clients, and ask questions and get answers and give them information in regards to pools. And those spiels I'd learn off just by listening to Dad as a kid, and looking back at it now as an adult, it's one of the greatest things I ever did, and it was a father and son thing that no one ever can take off me, and I got a lot of respect for him in that sense. And I guess back in the day, I never really understood what was going on, but it was just the way we were brought up, and an old school type of concept.
Well, it sounds like you were imitating his sales talents.
Definitely, mate. I'm a splitting image of, and I'm proud of that. You know what I mean? I said, it's pretty cool when you grow up with your parents that you can honestly, now that Mum and Dad have passed, you can put them on a pedestal and go, well, I was proud of them.
All right, we'll get to that soon.
Yeah.
So you moved to Tweed Heads. You were at in grade 1 to 3. You were at Coolangatta State School.
Yeah.
Was that a good time for you in that early? I guess it's early, but what do you remember from that time?
Well, I said we got out of Woodridge. Dad was he had kidney failure back in the day, and he was given a shortened time with the technology of transplants. And that wasn't a very common thing back then, and he wanted to better his family life in the short time he had. So we moved to Tweed Heads and lived on a canal. We rented a place down there so Dad could give Mum the dream and his kids the opportunity to live that lifestyle, because there wasn't a lot on offer in Woodridge. And that was his purpose behind the move to Tweed Heads. And he would commute back to Woodridge to go to work each day, and we would live at Tweed Heads and go to the local school, Coolangatta State School.
Going from, I guess, inland to the beach would have been
massive change of plan, mate. Yeah. Massive change. And I said I'm fair-skinned. I'm not a bronzed Iron Man type of thing. So, they were good days, mate, really good days.
Well, what did you think when you first got down to the ocean and saw that, the amount of blue ocean and white sand coming from Woodridge? It would have been a shock.
Well, we never spent every day, all day at the beaches and that. But, I guess we were always sort of around the home sort of people with the 4 bricks and the plank of wood and a BMX bike in the middle of the street in a cul-de-sac. So, and we sort of grew up throwing balls against walls and and then Dad had a little boat that we used to go out fishing with, and we try and live the lifestyle that he tried to. Well, he did provide for us, because of his medical history.
Sure. You attended Somerset College. You were a foundation student, grades 4 to 7. What does that mean, foundation student?
Well, the reason we went to Somerset College is my older sister had a teacher that taught at Cooling Out of State called. His name was Frank Farocco. Yeah. He was from American. Apparently, he never taught me personally, but he taught my older sister. He was a really good teacher, and he actually moved from Cooling Out of State School to Somerset College when it first opened in '84. Yeah. And my sister was getting in close to high school at that stage, and we chased the teacher because he was going to be teaching my sister in the grades that he was nominated at Somerset College. Sure. So we all went there. Once again, Dad was doing well with his pool business. It was a brand new college school. It wasn't a state school. And obviously, Dad being Dad, just tried to do the right thing by his kids. So we all went to Somerset College.
Sure. Just explain, you chased the teacher. What do you mean? You were so impressed with the teaching style?
Well, obviously, my older sister must have been, and my parents obviously had a relationship with him in some shape or form. Yep. That was the decision my parents made, and we were happy to go with it because we didn't know much better.
Wow, thanks to that teacher, obviously. It was a big influence. Okay, so you attended TSS, which is the Southport School, grades 8 to 10, and you got a football scholarship. Now,
well, I was playing rugby union at Somerset College, and at that stage, my parents, we were living at Tweed Heads, and then once again, Dad being the dad he was, we then moved out to Nerang because my sisters wanted horses.
Wow.
So we moved out to Nerang, and once again, Dad was still sick, so we rented a 6-acre paddock out at Nerang, had a tennis court, and the sisters got involved in horses. And I was still at the Somerset College, and I was playing rugby union for the school at that stage, and I was obviously scouted from however that works, and they were asked us what high school I was going to attend. I was in grade 7 at that stage, and the answer was just a local school because we were going to be moving to Paradise Point. And they said, "Well, would you be interested in coming to the TSS?" And obviously the funds weren't available to do such a
not
move.
Cheap, is it? For
not
TSS?
Cheap, no. So they offered us to apply for a scholarship, and I got accepted on a footy scholarship. Yeah.
I've been into TSS, and obviously when you walk in there, it's just the whole hallway's just covered with trophies and just awards. So it's obviously a great catchment for athletes for that school. What was it TSS like apart from the sports? Obviously, is it a good place? Was it a good place for teachers and learning and things like that?
Well, I guess I rebelled on that decision. For it was an all boys school, and I was going into high school, and I guess the hormonal decisions behind that were obvious, and so I sort of went in dragging my heels, but I knew that there was going to be opportunity for an education.
Sure.
So I guess because I sort of grew up in Woodridge, going to TSS, there was a lot of BMWs and a lot of stigma and ego amongst the students. And I never really caught onto that culture. In fact, I rebelled against it. I think that's what sort of come to a decision with my exit in grade 10.
Okay.
And then went to a local school. But I said the school was a beautiful school in the presentation and the professionalism, and I guess I was just too young to really understand that the benefits I could have got by hanging in there a little longer.
Let's just touch on that with the affluence and obviously the wealth of students coming to school. And you were a kid from the streets.
Mm-hmm.
How did you find that? I know that definitely with the affluence would have been a bit different for you, but did you find that you just dug in a bit harder? You were just a kid that just wanted to go a bit harder because you just came from a bit of adversity?
Yeah, well, I guess I struggled with the social side of it because it was well known that I was a kid on a scholarship.
Yeah.
And when I got picked up from school, it wasn't in a BMW.
Yeah.
And I felt that judgmental thing standing at the local car pickup.
Yeah, sure.
And obviously with the outside of school social thing, there was a lot of jet skis and that I wasn't sort of familiar with, and I guess I found it hard to find true friends in the sense that because I was judged because of where I came from and what I was, I sort of never really accepted.
Yep.
And But I said that's life in general, I
Well,
guess.
I'm a big believer in adversity makes you stronger. So
Yeah,
I'm
definitely.
glad that. What was some of your best and worst subject in school at the time?
I've always been good at maths.
Yep.
And to this date, I'm not good at English. I'm not a very good reader.
Sure.
So I've always been look and learn sort of guy.
Yep.
Which is the way I brought up with Dad. He always showed me stuff, and
Yep.
I've never been one to sit down and read how to change a tire on a car.
Yep.
I've just watched,
All hands.
look and learn.
You attended Coombera High School, grades 11 to 12. You were house captain.
I was, yes.
How'd that come about?
Well, I said at that stage I was we from Nerang Dad bought a block of land at Paradise Point back in the day before it turned into a boom. I think we paid $86,000 for a waterfront block of land at Paradise Point, which is unheard of these days. And I think Dad built a double-story house on it. I think back in the day it cost him just over $200,000. And so we moved to Paradise Point, and I played local rugby league for the Runaway Bay Junior Rugby League Club. And I was still at TSS when we moved to Paradise Point. And half of the devise of me leaving TSS was they found out I was playing rugby league outside as well as rugby union.
Okay.
And the school wasn't happy with that decision, which their investment was me playing rugby league and I was good at athletics. I represented Queensland with athletics, being a sprinter. I was pretty quick.
Yep.
And then at 14, I developed diabetes. And the side effects of developing diabetes is you lose a bit of weight, you've got no energy, and that affected my size and my weight and my speed, which consequently affected my football. And then they found out that I was playing rugby league, and rugby league is what I've always grown up on. And I didn't want to give up that sport. And I had good mates, once again, because I was hanging around the local kids that went to the local state schools. And I felt that was my strength, that I didn't want to be a high flyer. I always wanted to stay grounded. And I think the people I was associating with were also grounded because they were from the streets. And I found my true friends through that avenue.
That's great to hear.
Mm.
Okay, let's have a touch on your family. Obviously, they're an inaugural part of your growing up and a big part of your learnings. Give me some. Tell me about your parents. Obviously, you said they've deceased, but give me a bit of a synopsis about who they were, and what they meant to you.
Well, Dad was. He said he's a salesman. He's he was a licensed real estate agent. So he had the gift of the gab. He was very good at that.
Was he honest?
Very honest, mate. Very simple.
Yep.
Very simple man. And I remember when we were living out in Nerang, and I knew why he was doing the horse thing and the tweed head thing, just to provide while his family while he was still on the planet. And I remember back we went out for a local Chinese meal, and it was about 2 or 3 k's home, and Mum and the girls drove home, and Dad said, I want to walk home with Steve. So he and I done the 3K walk home, and during that walk he pretty much laid on me, as heavy as it was, that the doctors had told him because of his kidney failure and his dialysis that he was on, that he wouldn't see me turn 13.
Wow.
So based on that, being the only bloke in the house, his only son, that he gave me the spiel on what to do when he was not there, and look after his sisters and do the right thing by Mum. And that was a heavy conversation, and then Mum was just the typical old school mum. She stayed at home and cared for the kids and done the right thing. She was always a behind the scenes mum, like most mums back in those days. And she had a heart of gold. She never burred up so between the two of them, I said, I've got great memories of their relationship, and their relationship probably towards us as kids.
Would you say you were perfectly parented?
I was, yeah, definitely, mate. Yeah, I've got no qualms in the way I was brought up in any shape or form.
Yep.
Very proud of that.
You have a twin sister, Debbie. She lives in Sydney. She works for ASIC and is in IT tech.
Mm-hmm.
Were you and Debbie close growing up?
Yeah, we were. Yeah, we used to fight like cat and dog. But I said, even to this day, my sisters, I always look out for my sisters. I guess the two girls in general, they can fight like cat and dog.
Okay.
So I said, based on the conversation Dad and I had back at Narang, is I've always tried to keep the peace between those two.
Yep.
So I am the meat in the sandwich. I accept that.
Yep.
It's a good thing. I enjoy it. But yeah, Debbie and I are very close, but we're apples and oranges in our habits, our social life. She loves the big smoke, the city. As much as I love going and visit her, I can't stand being in Sydney for too long.
Okay.
But yeah, she thrives on it.
And you got an older sister, 4 years older. She lives in Yatala, Queensland. So she's local and she works for Visi and a senior accountant. How well do you guys get on?
We get on well. Nikki and I get on very well. She's a quiet clam. She actually was up in Ingham, up near Cairns there for a while. She's been to university. She's done the education thing. Yeah. I've never been to uni or college. She's probably the smartest out of all of us. She's an accountant. So she was up in Ingham for a long, long time, and she's only been probably back 5-6 years now. She's recently had kids, twins. So it's the chapter continues.
Yeah.
But she's a worker. I'll give her that. She's a yeah, man. I've got a lot of time for her too.
That's so nice to hear. Okay, so you obviously grew up being a pretty excelled at sports. You represented Queensland athletics during school. Tell me about that.
Well, I've always said, being a red-headed bloke, my old man always told me, mate, he said, you've got two options in life, mate. You learn how to fight or learn how to run.
Yeah.
And I chose option B, and it served me well. And I said, I've always enjoyed athletics, but I said, unfortunately, the diabetes thing at 14 crippled that.
It's young, isn't it, to have that?
It was and I guess it was a bit of a thing, okay, well, this has happened to me in the sense I've lost all my energy, I've lost all my speed, I've lost a lot of weight. What's going on, Doc? He said, well, we'll test you for diabetes, and obviously the outcome came back positive for that one. Well, how do you get it? And the answer to that was, we don't know.
Wow. Okay.
That blew me away.
Yeah.
And then, then the next question was, well, how to get rid of it? Well, we can't. You're stuck with it for the rest of your life.
Is it hereditary?
It's not. There's no history of it.
Wow.
Which is another thing I rebelled. My twin sister never got it. So I guess as a 14-year-old, I had to ask myself some personal questions like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, sure.
I've always been to Christian schools, as in Somerset and TSS. I've never stole handbags off pensioners or, key cars. And I guess based on those decisions, I had a lot of things, like I'd never be able to have McDonald's or fast food again was the theory going around back in those days.
Yep.
And I'd be jabbing myself with needles for the rest of my life.
Yep.
So I guess as a 14-year-old, I just went into a dark shadow and rebelled, I guess, for a long time.
So what saved you?
Football.
Okay.
Probably football and friends. Yeah, pretty much.
You played NRL in America for the Connecticut Wildcats, which is the sister club to the Western Tigers, 2004 and 5. Tell me about that time.
Well, I said I came back from Perth. I was living in Perth for I've been a few places now, but I came back from Perth back in 2003. Although I was a Runaway Bay footballer, I got back and some friends I played for Runaway Bay as juniors were coaching for the Southport Tigers, the arch enemy. And so I got back there and started playing football for Southport. I didn't know a lot of people back because I'd lived in Perth for 7 years at that stage. So I got back, I snuck back onto the coast because I'd separated from my wife, and I guess I just needed to find myself again, and I didn't have the answers to all the questions I had.
Find the purpose again.
And so I got back into my football to vent, I think, and I was playing some good football, and then the offer came through was, would you be interested in going to America and playing the NRL in the States? And my first answer to that was, I can't. I'm married with 2 kids.
Yeah.
And that's when my dad pulled me up and said, well, son, you're still waiting for all those the ripples in the water to iron out in the finalisation of all those questions that are involved in divorce. And he said, go over there and see the world, mate. I've never done such a thing because I'd always been a young father.
Yeah.
And so I did, knew nothing about the planet. And I took up the opportunity and went over there as in a dark space. And Rupert Murdoch, he flew us over there and he gave us a house, gave us company cars. And over there in the States, the teams aren't owned by boards; they're owned by like the NBA. They're owned by people, billionaires. And we go over there. We're sponsored by Red Bull and Stella, and I started playing football in the States. And with that came, acknowledgement, Australian rugby player. I mean, there were 280 million people back in the States then, and 140 million women. You know what I mean? And
you're the Aussie boy.
And I was an Australian rugby player. Like suddenly I'd left a population of 20 million. You know what I mean? The population of New York was the population of Australia. And I guess they just loved me. They just took me under their wing. And I guess prior to that visit, I was doing all the dark things that you do when you're sort of lost in pills and drink, and not silly drink, but enough to say this isn't who I am.
Yeah.
And I went over there, and the welcome mat just came on, and said the blokes and the women just loved me, and I just went, well, hang on.
Yeah.
And I was seeing the world, and I was being looked after by the sponsors and stuff. And outside the footy, we were going to the colleges and teaching all these guerrilla men, reject gridiron players that couldn't make the NFL rugby, the gridiron over there, that how to play rugby league because they didn't have a clue. Which was the main reason we were brought over there in the first place, was to help them develop their game. So I was teaching kids how to play footy. It was a real high for me in that sense. And then on the social scene, outside of that, it was, well, I said, people just loved me. And I guess towards the end of it, I was more about the party than I was about the footy in the end, because I knew my time would be limited over there because I was a 30-year-old footballer at that stage. And there were plenty of fish. That's when I got introduced to plenty more fish in the sea, mate. And I got loved heaps of time over there, and it was the greatest medicine in the world for me. And that was the start of the spring in my step.
Yep.
Yeah, and I still have that today.
So give me a time, a wild time way over there that is just you want to bring to the forefront and said, hey, I can't believe this happened. What's something that stands out that was such a great time?
In the party scene? I said we would go down down there. They used to have what they call their state of origin. In the footy over there was a Northern Conference and a Southern Conference, like they do in the gridiron. They have their sections.
Okay.
So they call it War on the Shore. So we go down to New Jersey, which was for the party place down there, and all these footballers were all down there, and you get selected as, it's almost like a state of origin set up, New South Wales versus Queensland.
Yep.
And we go down. Unfortunately, I broke my scaphoid bone in one game prior to that, so I had to sit on the sideline. So we went down there for 5 days of War on the Shore, and they played some great footies, and we just partied. And they said we go to these, and then I met a girl. She invited me back with her 5 friends to her villa, on her parents' villa on this crazy lake.
Yep.
And me and 5 girls are in this spa, and they're just loving me for Australian rugby player.
They're saying, say something. You're like, what do you want me to say?
And that was exactly how it was. And in fact, we go to a lot of the clubs, and I couldn't comprehend that we go into these massive bars, 55 plasma screens on TV, NASCAR, ice hockey, you name it, it's on these screens. There's 400 blokes in these screens. 400 blokes are watching these plasma TVs, high-fiving each other, doing their Budweiser thing. Yep. And there's 300 chicks on the dance floor dancing with each other or with themselves. I'm like, you boys missing the plot here? I'm like, well, I'm not into the ice hockey and that. So I'm like, mate, I'd just be on a dance floor dancing with 300 chicks. There were times there that I'm like, Australian rugby player? I'm like, God damn.
Yeah.
And I'd just go to the bar and order a drink, and I'd make sure I'd shout it at the barman. Hey, mate, can I have a Corona?
Yep.
And go, God damn, where are you from?
Where are you from?
I'm from Japan. No, you're not. Where are you from? From Australia. I thought so. Yeah. I said, yeah, mate. And what are you doing here? I said, just here to drink your beer and dance.
Yeah.
So you want to dance? Yeah, I'd love to dance.
That's awesome.
And Helen, Colleen, Michelle, this is Steve from Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah, say something, as you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, mate. A lot of good times, mate. Plenty of fish in the sea.
I tell you, I did a bit of time over in the States, and exactly the same thing. I was in Indonesia surfing for 3 months, and then I arrived into Southern California and happened to meet a guy who lived on the Strand in Hermosa Beach. And I remember opening up the shutter doors and seeing roller skates go along the Strand and look like Baywatch.
Yeah, right.
I was like, oh my God. And then when I went to the bar that night, I said to the guy, where's the dunny? He goes, what?
Yeah.
It's the
Little
dunny.
dingo.
He goes, what?
Yeah,
He
man.
goes, where are you from? I said, I'm from Australia. He goes, oh my God. And he called all these people over. Such a novelty
It
for
is.
them.
And they're so naive over there in the sense that we all live in tin roofs and we've got kangaroos as pets.
We could
And
sell
when
that
we
drop
check
board.
when we check the letterbox, we step over snakes to get to it.
Yeah, sell that drop bear story all day.
Oh, mate.
All right, mate, let's get into your success now. Okay, so when did you go into the business with TriStar?
Well, it was actually America that sparked it. We said we'd go over there and we'd play on these stadiums because it was the gridiron off season. Because the comp was starting fresh over there, Murdoch was running it because of his failed Super League venture here in Australia when the ARL went head to head with Super League, and that was back in 2000.
Why'd they do that?
Well, Murdoch wanted a piece of the action.
Okay.
And obviously, I'm not sure the politics behind it and that, but it was granted. And that's when the division between the ARL became ARL versus Super League. Pick your club. And the money was the money was rumoured to be in Super League.
Yep.
So we all chased that dream.
Yep.
And the country couldn't support two comps. The Broncos won it that year, Super League, and it closed down. And Murdoch had to go home with his tail between his legs. He gave it a crack, but he failed. So rather than, obviously, I don't know the man personally, but met him a couple of times. But he obviously went back and went, no, I'm not out yet. I'll take it to the next level and try and do it here in the States, which he did. Yeah. But unfortunately, the talent wasn't there to entertain it. Hence why the imports were brought in. Myself being one of them. And then we were playing on these surfaces, these AstroTurf paddocks, and made the professionalism in the surf was just caught my eye.
Yeah.
The pace and the consistency of the whole paddock was one.
Yep.
And this is 2004, and I had a little think to me and said, mate, no one's doing this back home. And outside the game, I got talking to curators and the people that were involved behind the scenes, behind the games, and asked 1,000 questions and got 1,000 answers and sort of done the maths and thought, well, wouldn't it be cool to sort of develop this back at home? Because to my knowledge, no one was doing it. And everyone I asked, no one knew anything about AstroTurf here back in 2004.
Are you saying just Queensland or whole Australia?
Once again, whole of Australia, to my knowledge. As I said, it wasn't a big market. Even now I ask people, how many people do you know that build tennis courts?
Yep.
And the answer is, I don't know anyone.
Yeah.
In any of these courts.
Yep.
So, and even now, when I'm back in Australia doing it now, and I tell people what I do, and the answer to that is sports instruction. And then 1,000 questions come after that because no one's ever heard of someone that does sports instruction.
Well, why don't you explain it for people that don't actually know what you do?
Yeah, so TriStar Sporting is just we focus on sports surfacing. There's a lot of versions, different applications for different sports, basketball, tennis courts. Even the domestic, if you fake grass in your home, seems to be taken off too these days. Who's got the time? But I've wanted to focus on the sports side of it because of the coverage on a business side of things. And I learnt there's a story going back from the States. I came back and I met a guy in Perth that was actually involved in texcreting and the acrylic, the hard court side of the stuff you see on the hard court tennis that was doing it. So after I returned back from America, I made contact with him, and him and I had a pretty good relationship. And I put my proposal to him that I wanted to learn it, and he said, well, mate, come down to Adelaide and I'll teach it to you. And so I flew down and I packed up. I left mum and dad. At that stage, I just got back from the States. I was still living with mum and dad because I lost my house and that in the decision with Perth. And I went down to Adelaide and eyes open and keen as mustard and learned from a guru in the industry. And he owns a company down there called Advanced Sporting Services, and his name was Brett Ariola, nicknamed Camel. So I went down there and worked for Camel just as a Joe Blow labourer, and got down there, and he took me under his wing and showed me the ropes of the application side of things. And I was doing really well at that, and it was all a learning curve. And then one of his leading hands, 6 months into that, pulled the pin. Those two had a massive fallout. And I guess Camel at the stage was chasing people he could trust and to run his business, because he was the office guy. He wasn't on the tools. And he asked me, would I be interested in taking up that role as project managing running his factory and the job sites. And I thought 6 months doing this trade, like, no way in the world am I qualified to do such a role. And once again, through discussions with Dad, sort of said, well, mate, hey, you're doing it now, mate. And the big picture was to come back and do it here on my own. He said, well, mate, if you can do it for him, you can do it for yourself.
I love your dad as a sounding board for you. He's just been such north-facing.
He's just a guru, mate. I wish we could have bottled him up and sold him. Yeah. And all my mates have got a lot of respect for him too, which is a good thing for me to hear, because obviously I'm his son, so naturally I'd have that thought to him. But it's pretty cool when others outside my circle vent the same suggestion that he was a legend.
Can I just touch on, if there was one piece of advice he gave you out of all those years, what's something that you still apply every day?
Oh, there's so many.
I just want one.
Well, that's a good question. I guess his main thing for me was to never put someone in a better position than yourself. Was probably one of the smartest things he ever said to me. But there were so many that I could rattle off, 50 that I still live today, each day, with the same principles and morals. But getting back to the sporting side of things, so Camel down there in Adelaide, and we succeeded. Camel's still trading down there with his business, and him and I contact all the time. And he would fly me home. The deal was I'd fly down there and he'd fly me home once a month. So I'd work 4 weeks. I was so keen, I had no friends down there as such. It was an AFL state, so there wasn't a lot of televised league. And I was bored. There was no surf as such. It was a different culture, Adelaide, towards the Gold Coast is where I was bored. So I was in a lonely spot in that sense. But I wasn't down there to social. I was down there to work and learn. Yeah. So it got to the stage where weekends, I'd like, boys, who wants to work the weekends? The work was there to be done. And I found it hard to find blokes that, they obviously had families and relationships. I found it hard because I just enjoyed doing what I was doing. Yeah. It was I get such a high out of doing a trade. It wasn't a job to me at all. Yep. It was going into these places and turning these schools and tennis clubs and basketball clubs and people's backyards into downgraded shitty courts into wow.
That's it.
The schools, the teachers love you. Yep. The principals loved you. Yep. The parents loved you. And more importantly, I was, with all due respect, I was getting fat kids off seats because they're all sitting under the pergola playing with iPhones, playing with Xboxes and not doing the stuff that I grew up, throwing balls against walls and kicking footies around. It seems to be a dying thing, and it was the massive high in I could have got out of the trade, and to this day I get it each time.
One of the things I noticed about you, Steve, especially with Play Hard Sports being some of your sports equipment you've used for the courts, is the Gold Coast City Council a lot of times insisted that you do the work. And I thought that was quite interesting that they always were referring you. Mm-hmm. Tell me about how that connection all came about.
I guess, like anything, once again, taught from growing up, is like, you don't chase the money, chase the work, do the work, and the money will come.
And do it well.
And I've always focused that with, even when I had the clubs and nightclubs in Perth, mate, I was always a people's person. Yeah. And I always did my best at what I could do. And the backlash of not doing such a thing was you'd have to go back and fix it. Yep. So I always took pride in what I did and made sure that the client or the customer was involved. And like Play Hard, if there was an issue on the field when I'm putting this stuff was I would get the feedback back to the manufacturer
Yep.
to make sure and help them run their businesses.
Yep. And better their product.
And more times than none, I'd actually go into their factory and talk, sit down with them and ask how they did it.
That.
And they would tell me how they did it, and I'd tell them my issues, and let's try and fix it.
Yep.
And that wasn't just with the sports equipment; that was with the synthetic grasses, and more importantly, the acrylic coats, the paints.
Yep.
Telling the manufacturers or the chemists that develop these products that, hey, this is what it's doing, and how can we stop that from happening?
Well, you're there at face value. You have to pass through that information back to the producers.
Oh, it's a massive thing in all trades.
For them to
communication. Yeah, it's a communication thing. And I guess with counsellors said, well, with any of my clients, man, I always took them as board as like, thank you for the opportunity of giving me the work. I won't let you down.
Yeah.
And that's where I am. That's what's got me to where I am today.
Yeah, I can see that it resonates. You got a great story, mate, about a life-saving issue that you helped save a guy's life. Run us through that. Tell us that great story.
In Perth, I went over. I left Perth. My girlfriend at the time and myself moved to Perth back in '96 because her family had left the Gold Coast and we were just about to have our second child. So the mum and dad were sort of sick and didn't have the time, so we made the decision to chase for family support, go to Perth with her family. The real estate was cheaper. We actually went over on a holiday, to be honest with you. And then while I was there, I was looking for jobs and I was working at Royal Pines Resort. I did a food and beverage traineeship straight out of school, which taught me service. And when I was there, I applied for 4 jobs just to see what they were paying. And out of the 4 jobs I applied for, 2 of them said, we want you. And I asked what they were paying, and it was 7 or 8 grand more than I was getting at Royal Pines. And I went, well, family support, cost of living was cheaper, and the money was better. So it was a no-brainer in that sense. And I contacted mum and dad, who dad was still pretty crook. He said, well, mate, that's your family now, mate. You need to focus on that. We'll be fine. He said he had good medical sort of stuff here. So I never came home from that holiday. And I told my dad to go around to my house and pack up my stuff and I'll get a sea container, and he did such a thing, and we never came home. It was a really weird thing. We had a return trip, we never came back.
Yeah.
And then I was working these clubs and nightclubs. I was running a country pub at the time, and I was on my way to work. It was a country pub, so I would go up there and work 4 days, live in the hotel, run the hotel, and come home and have 3 quality full days uninterrupted with my family. I was on my way to start my first day of my 4-day shift, and I came over this crest, and it's 2 hours out of Perth, on the way to York, a little country town in Perth. And I come over this crest, and here's this this car wrapped around a tree on fire. There's 4 other cars parked on the side of the road, and I sort of pulled up, being the 5th car. I said, that's pretty serious, and got out of the car, walked up. There was a first group watching this car burn. Oh, what's going on? So someone's hit it. Well, where is he? No one knows. Got to the main group who'd been there longer and said, what's going on? Or someone's hit this tree. And where are they? Oh, they're still in it. I was like, well, no one wanted to go near the car because it was on fire. So I was 26 at the time, strong as an ox, and went down the bank. Everyone was screaming for me to come back, and I stuck my head into this bloom of smoke. And as I did, this window cleared, and I could see the bloke unconscious behind the wheel, covered in blood. Got to him and put my hand on him, and sure enough, he rolled his head. He looked at me, and I went, holy hell, this guy's still alive. And couldn't get the door open. And people talk about adrenaline rush, and I remember just grabbing the windscreen and just folded the windscreen off the car because it was cracked, and reached him with one hand, and he wasn't pinned or nothing, luckily, but I rolled him out onto the bonnet and threw him over my shoulder, and Chuck Norris style carried him out of the smoke, and was walking up the bank. And as I was walking up the bank, 8 seconds after I pulled him away from the car blew up like a bomb. And I couldn't see that because I had my back, so I could only see the people that were watching me do the act on the bitumen road, and they all just dove and ran away from the flame, and got to the top of the crest of the hill, and someone had put down a tray of a ute, and I put him back on it and looked back to go and see if anyone else is in the car, and Mate, the car was this 400-year-old tree, mate. It was well ablaze. It was February, so it was summer in a country paddock, and the whole field was on fire at that stage because the petrol had splurted out from the car. And then they drove him to a country hospital, and then from there he was emergently put back into Royal Perth Hospital, where I didn't know anything about what was going on at that stage. But at that stage, the radios and the TV crews had got wind of it, and suddenly I was getting bombarded in this little country town with this thing. And then,
but what I want to know is, no one else did anything, but you did.
It was a real weird.
Why?
It was just an adrenaline thing. I've always been that guy, just to go in and, I've always
so dangerous.
I've always run in and just sort of done things because.
Did you think, or just you didn't?
No, I didn't think at all. Well, I just knew I was here and he was there, and
no one else moved.
And I could get to that point, or at least go and have a look closer to that point.
Yeah.
And I guess
it was hot, and you could smell it. And
mate, it was tricky. Looking back at it now, now it's all happened, and I can. So the adrenaline kicked in, and that's what took over. And then consequently, it happened that he'd left a family reunion half hour earlier.
Yep.
And he was on his way back to Perth for a car expo. And that's when the accident happened, and obviously the rest of his family members had left half hour after him, and his uncles, his aunties, his mum and dad, his brothers and sisters all drove past the accident, and no one stopped because they didn't recognise the car. Which was, now I know, talking to the parents now, that she said if he died, and he would have died if it didn't happen, it would have haunted her for the rest of her life, and it was a pretty cool time in my life to look back. Well, said, and I've contributed, and it's kind of weird. They don't teach you that stuff at school. It's just sort of happened.
Mate, you're a hero.
In that, I was labelled. I got a bravery award and won a human spirit award for 2002. I was on all the radio stations back in the day. It was kind of unreal. Yeah. And my wife pulled me up at the end and said, mate, did you think of what the backlash of it not going the way it did? That hit home pretty quick because it was pretty hectic. So that hit home pretty hard. And I guess I'm lucky that we're both here to share that story today, and to this day we are mates. And getting back to who this guy is, the guy that I've actually working for in Adelaide was his stepdad. That's how I met this guy that done the text reading and that. He was the stepdad of the kid I pulled out of the car. He was 19 at the time, and to this day we're really close mates. His nickname is Crash because of the accident. He fractured his skull and spleen. He's got pins all through him. He had to learn how to walk and all that sort of stuff again. And he was 19, and it opened up his life, his eyes in regards to life and what it's all about. And I had 1,000 stories by that stage, and he now, I sort of became a mentor of his, and we've travelled the world together, and he's actually worked for my business on a few occasions because he actually does through his stepdad. He knows the trade. So
does he introduce you as the guy that saved his life?
No, we don't talk about it much at all, to be honest with you. Yeah, it's really cool in that sense. And I don't want to be known as that guy. I'm quite happy just to be his mate, you know what I mean? Yeah. But I am really glad that because of the accident, he saw the light in regards to life, and I said to him, well, mate, come and I'll show it to you. And I'll show you how I see. And he actually admires the way I sort of live in that. So I'm happy to share that with someone.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great story, mate. Thanks for sharing it.
Yeah, cool.
What's the future hold for you?
Good question. I said I've been a diabetic now since I was 14. So I guess growing up watching Dad grow up with health issues and the struggles he had with that, and having to be a provider, it's always been a daunting, untold internal demon of mine. And I guess the drive for me to do the work and make the coin to live the life I want to live has been in overdrive, because I didn't want to be trying to do that with an amputated leg, trying to earn a crust as a sports applicator. Kind of hard thing to do. Yep. So that's been my drive personally.
Yep.
And I guess that's the $1 million question I can't really answer. I mean, I've still got a passion for the trade.
Yeah.
But I guess I need to ask myself the question, what is the meaning of life? recently I lost a friend, a good friend I played footy with, a couple of years older than me, a mountain of a man back in the day. Got diagnosed with motor neuron disease, and 2 years later he was gone, like uncomprehendable, family and all. Yeah. And I asked the question, did he live? I know Steve Jobs well documented that before his passing, that did these people really live? And yes, they've been successful in business, but I guess the question is, were they successful in life? And that's the drive I've got. With the answer to that question, I haven't answered yet because I'm still trying to find it. But I am living. I've always lived, and no one will take that away from me. If I want to do something, I'll try and do it if it's doable. Yeah,
mate. I always ask my guests when they come on, if you had the opportunity to place a phone call back to yourself when you were 20, what would you tell yourself?
Wow. Yeah, that is a big good question. I don't think I'd change much at all, really. I mean, the question is, I'd probably change some relationship questions. I said I've met 1,000 good people, and a lot of good women, and I guess I wish I'd focused on staying with the good people that I've met in that department. And yeah, it's kind of a funny world now because, as I said, it's an internet world. I mean, people just don't socialise as well as it. In fact, I struggle with people that like to talk because it's all done via email, and the relationships thing is all done online. And I've always met people in pubs and clubs because it's always been where I've vented my social life. And people just don't like talking to strangers anymore. It's a shame. It's a dying shame. Yeah. I'm trying to change it, and hence why I'm here today, and to tell a story, because a lot of people just sort of close up, and I guess the society today is people are scared, mate. They lock themselves in their houses. There's a lot of negative stuff going on the planet. You don't have to watch the TV to go on. And I think as a society, I said, well, I think we're losing the concept of what it's all about: community, friends, family. I mean, there was a day that we used to work 5 days and have 2 off. Like, what happened to that? Mm. I mean, these people are just trying to get bigger cars and bigger houses, and why? Because that's what society, expects. Yeah. These shows on TV, Love Islands, like, what's that promoting? Yeah. I mean, these are kids' shows. Yeah. And they're watching these, the kids are watching these shows, learning that adultery is a good thing. I mean, it's a sad planet. Sure. I hate watching it.
Steve, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. We've got a lot out of it. You've got a lot of people that are around you that really respect and like the way you conduct business. And I want to thank you very much for coming onto the show. I haven't asked this before, and obviously this hasn't come into my parameters, but if your dad was looking down, which he is, what would you like to say to him from a man you've become through his guidance?
I'd have to say, I'd shake his hand and say thanks. Yeah. It's a tricky one.
Mate, thank you so much for sharing everything.
Happy days. Thanks.
Thank you.